A simple act of kindness in a small-town diner changes the life of a struggling waitress in ways she never imagined, and catches the attention of a billionaire who could make her dreams come true. Emily had been working at the little diner for almost 3 years now. It was a small place, the kind of diner where everyone knew each other, where the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon seemed to greet you as soon as you stepped inside. Emily loved the diner for its warmth and simplicity, but it didn't pay much. She worked long hours, sometimes double shifts, just to make ends meet. Her apartment was tiny, her bills were piling up, and yet, somehow, she always found a way to put a smile on her face for the customers who walked in. One chilly Thursday morning, Emily was wiping down the tables when she noticed a young woman sitting alone in a corner booth, trying to keep her little son entertained with crayons and a coloring book. The mother's face looked tired, her eyes a little sad, and she kept glancing down at her wallet as if counting coins she didn't have. Emily had seen this look before. She remembered her own mother, when Emily was a little girl, struggling to pay for groceries, struggling to make life seem normal even when it was hard. Emily felt a tug at her heart. She wanted to help, but she knew she didn't have much herself. Her paycheck barely covered rent, and she still owed a few months of bills. But she also knew that sometimes, the smallest gestures could mean the most. She watched the woman Rachel, as Emily later learned her name, trying to cheer up her son, making him laugh, and hiding her own stress behind a smile. There was a quiet dignity in her struggle that made Emily admire her immediately as the morning went on. Emily brought coffee and pancakes to other tables. We smiled at regulars and made small talk, but her eyes kept drifting to Rachel and her son. She noticed the little ways Rachel tried to make the day normal for her child, like letting him choose which syrup he wanted or carefully cutting up his pancakes into tiny pieces. It made Emily think about how hard it must be to keep your child happy when you're worried about every single penny. Then it happened. Rachel looked up from her wallet and sighed. Emily knew that sigh all too well. It was the kind of sigh that carries worry, frustration, and exhaustion all at once. Emily's heart ached. She walked over to the counter, pretending to check something with the cash register, and thought quickly, could she do it? Could she cover the bill for someone she didn't even know? She thought about her own bills, her own tight budget. But she also thought about the little boy, how his face lit up at the pancakes, how he didn't deserve to see his mother stressed over something as simple as a meal. Emily made her decision. She went to the cashier and quietly slipped her debit card across the counter. "This one's on me," she whispered, careful not to draw attention. The cashier looked surprised but nodded and processed the payment. Emily felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She wasn't supposed to do this. She didn't know if she could afford it, but seeing Rachel's reaction was worth every penny. Rachel didn't notice Emily right away. She was too focused on the little boy, who had just discovered that he could eat pancakes faster than his mother could cut them. When Rachel finally saw the receipt showing the meal had already been paid for, her eyes widened. She looked around, confused, then realized that someone had quietly taken care of her bill. Tears started to form, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the emotion she felt swelling inside. Emily watched from across the diner, pretending to wipe tables, trying to act casual. She didn't want Rachel to feel embarrassed or to think she owed her anything. She just wanted her to have one small moment of relief, one tiny break in a life that was clearly full of challenges. For a brief moment, Emily felt like maybe she could make a difference, even in a small way. As Rachel quietly thanked the cashier and left, Emily felt a strange mix of pride and worry. She knew she had taken a risk, that her own finances were tight, but she also knew it had been the right thing to do. She returned to her duties, serving coffee, chatting with regulars, and trying not to think too much about whether she had made the right decision. Deep down, she knew that sometimes kindness didn't have to make sense. Sometimes it just had to happen. That morning, Emily didn't realize that someone else had noticed her act. At a table nearby, a man had been quietly observing everything. He didn't interrupt or comment, but he saw the careful way Emily had helped Rachel without making a scene. He noticed her empathy, her courage, and her willingness to put someone else's needs above her own, even when she didn't have much to give. Little did Emily know that one small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that neither she nor Rachel could have imagined. And it would all begin with the simple, heartfelt decision to help a struggling mother and her child. Even for just one morning. By the time Emily finished her shift, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. She had worked hard, faced her own worries, and yet somehow, she had managed to make a difference. She didn't know it yet, but this single act of generosity was about to change her life in ways she couldn't even begin to imagine. And as she locked the diner door and stepped out into the crisp morning air, Emily smiled, knowing that she had done something good, something true, something that came straight from the heart. At the other end of the diner, sitting quietly at table 6, was a man named Robert Hale. He appeared to be just another customer, a middle-aged man with neatly combed gray hair, wearing a simple suit and sipping his coffee slowly. Most people who walked into the diner wouldn't have guessed he was a billionaire. Robert preferred to keep a low profile. He didn't flaunt his wealth or talk about his businesses. In fact, many locals didn't even know his full story. To them, He was just a man who enjoyed a quiet breakfast and sometimes left an unusually generous tip. On that particular morning, Robert had come in early, as he often did, to enjoy the peaceful hours before the diner filled up with the usual crowd. He liked to watch people, observe their small routines, and notice details others overlooked. He could spend hours listening to conversations, watching interactions, and trying to understand human behavior. And that's exactly what he noticed when he saw the young mother with the little boy in the corner. Emily was bustling around the diner as she always did, her energy bright even though she looked tired. Robert observed her carefully, noticing the way she paused for just a moment at table 3, checking on the customers, then glanced over at the mother and child. There was something different in her movements that morning. It wasn't just ordinary service. There was a gentleness, a kind of attentiveness that went beyond her duties. Robert watched quietly, his interest piqued. Then he saw it happen. Emily walked over to the counter, speaking briefly to the cashier. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly, curious. What was she doing? Minutes later, he saw the cashier hand the young mother a receipt, and Rachel's eyes widened in disbelief. Her hands trembled slightly as she realized her bill had been paid. She looked around, her mouth forming a silent thank you. But Emily had already returned to wiping tables as if nothing had happened. Robert felt a strange smile form on his face. This was exactly the kind of moment he lived for. Moments of genuine kindness that went unnoticed by most. He wasn't there to interfere or make a show of himself. He understood the value of such acts because he had seen them in his own life. He remembered times when someone had helped him, not for recognition, not for reward, but simply out of human compassion. And he knew that such acts, no matter how small, had a way of echoing far beyond the moment. As he sipped his coffee, Robert continued to observe. He noticed how Rachel tried to compose herself after realizing the bill had been paid. She hugged her child a little tighter, whispered something that made the boy giggle, and finally took a deep breath, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over her. Emily, unaware that she had been watched, continued with her work, smiling at regulars, chatting with colleagues, and moving from table to table with effortless grace. Robert admired her discretion. She hadn't made a scene, hadn't called attention to herself, and hadn't demanded recognition. She had simply acted from the heart. Robert's thoughts wandered to his own life. He had accumulated wealth, yes, but he also understood the loneliness and isolation that often came with it. He had learned that money could solve many problems, but it couldn't buy genuine human connection, empathy, or the warmth of someone's kindness. Watching Emily that morning reminded him of the people who had helped him when he needed it most, often anonymously, and it stirred something inside him. He also noticed the little things, the way Emily's eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way she spoke softly to the customers, the way she seemed to carry both patience and warmth even when the diner was busy. Robert had a keen eye for character, trained from years of running businesses and evaluating people, and he could tell that Emily wasn't just doing her job. She genuinely cared about the people around her. That kind of authenticity was rare, and it struck a chord deep within him. As Rachel finished her meal and quietly left the diner, Robert made a mental note of Emily's name. He wanted to remember her, not for the sake of recognition, but because he sensed that her actions reflected something more, a core goodness that didn't go unnoticed. Even if the world rarely acknowledged it, he realized that people like Emily were rare treasures, the kind of individuals whose influence could spread far beyond what they imagined. Robert stayed behind after finishing his coffee, lingering at his table while watching Emily continue her work. He didn't approach her immediately. He wanted to understand more, to see how she treated other customers, how she handled small challenges, and whether her kindness was consistent or just a one-time act. Over the next several minutes, he observed as she balanced multiple tables, attended to small crises like spilled drinks or forgotten orders, and always maintained her calm and warmth. In Robert's eyes, this confirmed what he had suspected. Emily's act of generosity toward Rachel wasn't a random gesture. It was part of who she was, a natural inclination to care for others, even when it cost her something personally. This kind of integrity was rare, and he felt compelled to remember it. He also knew that he had a role to play, though he wasn't sure yet what that would be. Before leaving, Robert quietly left a tip on the table. Not unusually large, but enough to be noticed if anyone looked. He wanted to make a small acknowledgement, not a dramatic one, because he knew the value of subtlety and timing. Then he stood, adjusted his coat, and prepared to leave the diner, still watching Emily for a brief moment as she moved with energy and grace. He was impressed, moved, and quietly inspired by what he had witnessed. Robert didn't approach Emily that morning. He didn't introduce himself, and Emily never knew that a billionaire had silently watched her. For him, the observation was enough. Sometimes, people needed to act without expecting anything in return, and sometimes, watching someone act with genuine compassion was its own reward. But deep inside, Robert knew that he wanted to do something more in the future. He didn't yet know what, but he understood that Emily's simple act of kindness had left an impression that wouldn't fade. As he stepped out of the diner and into the cool morning air, Robert felt a quiet sense of anticipation. He had seen something rare that day, a spark of goodness that reminded him of what was truly important in life. He knew that this encounter, though brief and seemingly ordinary, would stay with him. And in some way, he realized, he might be able to make a difference too, inspired by the very act he had silently witnessed. Little did Emily know that her small gesture, paying for a stranger's meal without expecting anything in return, not only relieved a struggling mother but had also caught the attention of a man who could change her life in ways she could never imagine. For Robert Hale, Table 6 would always be a memory of unexpected human kindness and a moment that reaffirmed his belief that the simplest acts often carry the most power. Emily finished her shift at the diner, her feet aching from hours of standing, but her heart feeling lighter than it had all day. She wiped down the last table, stacked the chairs, and glanced around the quiet diner. The morning rush was over, and only a few regulars lingered, chatting quietly over their coffee. She felt a small sense of pride for the kindness she had shown earlier, though she tried not to dwell on it too much. In the back of her mind, she wondered briefly about the young mother and her little boy. She hoped that meal had given them even a small sense of relief, a moment where life didn't feel so heavy. That as Emily wiped the counter one last time, she noticed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath a salt shaker near the corner booth. She picked it up and realized it was a note, written in neat handwriting. Curious, she unfolded it and read the words, "Thank you for your kindness. You have made a real difference today. Please know that what you do matters." Emily's heart warmed. The note was simple, but it carried so much meaning. She didn't know who had left it, but she felt a rush of gratitude and a little bit of surprise. Even though she had acted quietly, someone had noticed and taken the time to acknowledge her effort. The rest of the morning passed slowly as she finished cleaning, closed the registers, and prepared to leave. Emily stepped outside into the crisp air, feeling the contrast between the bustling energy of the diner and the quiet street outside. She walked to her small car parked a few blocks away, her mind replaying the scene with the young mother and her child. She remembered the relief in the mother's eyes, the way the little boy laughed when he realized he could eat without worry. That memory stayed with her as she started her drive home, a reminder that even small acts could have a meaningful impact. Meanwhile, Robert Hale, the man at table 6, had not immediately left the diner after witnessing Emily's act of kindness. He had lingered, quietly observing how she treated the other customers, noticing the consistency of her patience and warmth. He was fascinated not just by the act itself, but by the way she carried herself, someone who could be so generous even when she had little to give. He understood the value of character, of quiet strength, and integrity. Most people, even those who performed acts of kindness, often sought recognition. Emily didn't. That was what made her extraordinary in his eyes. Robert thought back to his own life, to the times he had been helped without knowing who would benefit from his actions. He remembered the small gestures of kindness that had shaped his journey when he was young, struggling, and uncertain about the future. There were people who had given him guidance, meals, advice, or even just encouragement when he needed it most. Those moments had stayed with him, long after the immediate help had passed. Watching Emily, he felt that same sense of hope and inspiration that he had felt when others had quietly helped him. After finishing his coffee, Robert decided to leave the diner but did not rush. He quietly folded a $20 bill and placed it on Emily's station. Not as a tip for her service, but as a small acknowledgement of the person he had seen her be. He wanted to show appreciation without creating any obligation, without making a scene. The subtlety of the gesture felt right to him. Robert didn't need Emily to know the magnitude of who he was or the impact he could have. He wanted to celebrate her character, not draw attention to himself. Emily had already left by the time Robert exited. He watched her walk down the street, her posture tired but dignified, her expression thoughtful. He knew that their paths would cross again in some way, though he wasn't sure how or when. There was something about her that left a lasting impression, a combination of courage, kindness, and humility that was rare. In a world where people often acted for personal gain, Emily's generosity shone brightly. Later that evening, Rachel, the young mother, reflected on what had happened that morning. She could hardly believe that a stranger had paid for her meal, someone who didn't even know her. The relief she felt wasn't just about the money, though that was certainly helpful. It was about being seen, about having someone care in a world that often felt indifferent. She carried that warmth with her as she returned to her small apartment with her son. It gave her energy to tackle the week ahead, to face bills, responsibilities, and challenges with a little more hope than before. That small act had reminded her that even in hard times, kindness could appear in unexpected places. Emily, meanwhile, went home to her modest apartment, preparing a simple dinner and thinking about the day. She was tired, yes, but content. There was a sense of quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had helped someone without expecting anything in return. She didn't know who had left the note at the diner, but she cherished it, keeping it close as a reminder that her actions mattered, even if the world didn't always notice. For Robert, the morning's events were a reflection of the kind of world he wanted to support, one where people helped each other, without expectation, where acts of compassion could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. He thought about Emily, about her integrity and empathy, and realized that she was a rare person, someone who could inspire others simply by being herself. That thought stayed with him long after he left the diner. settling in his mind as a quiet mission to somehow support her in ways that would make a real difference in her life. That evening, Emily could not stop thinking about the young mother and child. She reflected on how small gestures could create large effects. Even a simple cup of coffee, a paid bill, or a word of encouragement could change someone's day, maybe even their life. It reminded her why she loved working in the diner. Despite the low pay and long hours, she realized that her job wasn't just about serving food. It was about moments like this, where she could quietly make a difference, offering hope to someone who needed it most. Across town, Robert sat in his study, thinking through ways he could acknowledge Emily's generosity without overwhelming her. He wanted to recognize her, not publicly, but in a way that would allow her to continue living her life with dignity and the same quiet generosity she had always shown. He began considering how he could approach her in the near future, imagining a scenario where he could provide support that might open new opportunities for her, without making her feel indebted or uncomfortable. That night, Emily finally went to bed, exhausted from her long day, but with a lightness in her heart. The events of the morning replayed over and over in her mind. The mother's gratitude, the child's laughter, the quiet note left at the diner. She drifted off to sleep with the sense that she had done something meaningful. And though she had no idea who had noticed, her actions had left a mark. Somewhere, Robert Hale was aware, quietly planning how to make sure that her kindness would not go unnoticed, that her life could be touched in return, in ways that would go far beyond what she imagined. The next morning, Emily woke up early, preparing for another long day at the diner. Still thinking about Rachel and her son, she carried with her a small, quiet hope that the world was not as harsh as it sometimes seemed, that kindness could be found in unexpected moments, and that her own small actions could ripple outward to touch lives in ways she would never fully know. Unbeknownst to her, Robert Hale had already made plans to follow up on what he had witnessed, setting the stage for an extraordinary connection that neither of them could yet foresee. The next morning, Emily arrived at the diner for her shift, tired but determined. She had been working long hours for years, and every day felt like a struggle to keep up with bills, rent, and the little things life demanded. She barely had time for herself, but she loved working at the diner because it allowed her to connect with people, even if only briefly. Her co-workers greeted her with familiar smiles, and the smell of coffee and bacon gave her a small, comforting sense of normalcy. She moved around efficiently, wiping tables, refilling drinks, and taking orders, all while keeping an eye on the little routines that made the diner run smoothly. As she finished preparing the counter for the morning rush, the diner owner, Mr. Thompson, motioned for her to step into the small office at the back. Emily felt a moment of nervousness. She wondered if she had made a mistake yesterday, maybe done something wrong. Perhaps she had overstepped by covering the young mother's bill. She followed Mr. Thompson into the cramped office, feeling her stomach tighten. To her surprise, Mr. Thompson handed her a plain, brown envelope. Emily's brow furrowed as she took it, unsure what it could be. She opened it carefully and found a handwritten letter inside. Her eyes widened as she read the words. Emily, your kindness has not gone unnoticed. What you did yesterday was extraordinary. Please know that the world sees your heart, and it wants to support you. Emily blinked several times, stunned. She had expected maybe a note of thanks from Mr. Thompson or perhaps a small acknowledgement, but this was different. The letter felt personal, sincere, and almost unbelievable. It continued, expressing admiration for her selflessness, her ability to help someone in need without expecting recognition, and her quiet strength that shone even in her exhaustion. It praised her character in a way Emily had never been praised before. Then she noticed something else inside the envelope. There was a business card with the name Robert Hale printed in simple, elegant font. At first, she didn't recognize it, but the letter explained that he was the man at table 6 the day before, the one who had been quietly observing her act of kindness. Emily couldn't believe it. She had no idea he was wealthy or influential. To her, he had just been another diner customer, quietly drinking his coffee. And now, she realized, this man had gone out of his way to reach her. Finally, her hands trembled as she looked at the final piece inside the envelope, a cashier's check. It was large enough to cover her outstanding debts, fix her broken-down car, and even give her a chance to enroll in the nursing program she had been dreaming about for years but had postponed due to financial constraints. Emily sat down slowly, letting the weight of it all sink in. The enormity of what she held in her hands made her heart race. She had never imagined that a single act of kindness could ripple outward in such a powerful way. She read the letter again, absorbing every word. Robert had written that he remembered being helped by strangers when he was struggling and that seeing her help Rachel had reminded him of those moments. He wanted to ensure that her generosity would be rewarded, that her potential could be realized, and that she could continue to make a difference in the world without being weighed down by financial stress. The thought that someone of his stature had noticed her, valued her actions, and wanted to help her in such a meaningful way left Emily almost speechless. Emily took a deep breath, her mind swirling with emotions. Gratitude, disbelief, excitement, and even a little fear all collided inside her. She had never experienced anything like this. She had helped someone without expecting anything in return. And now the universe, or at least Robert Hale, was returning that kindness in a way she could never have imagined. It wasn't just money. It was recognition, validation, and an opportunity to change her life. For a moment, Emily simply sat in the office, holding the envelope and the check, tears welling in her eyes. She thought about her life up to this point. The long hours, the financial struggles, the constant worry about making ends meet. She thought about her dreams of going to nursing school, dreams she had almost given up on because of the burdens she carried. And now, thanks to the kindness of one stranger noticing her own act of kindness, those dreams felt suddenly within reach. She left the office and walked back into the diner, trying to act normally, but her co-workers noticed something different about her. There was a brightness in her eyes, a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. She carefully tucked the envelope into her bag, feeling a mix of humility and excitement. She knew she had to be careful, that she couldn't let pride get in the way of her gratitude. This was a gift, a chance to step forward into a new chapter of her life, and she vowed to honor it by continuing to be the kind of person who made a difference in the world. Robert Hale, on his part, had been quietly following the next steps. He had been impressed not only by Emily's act of generosity but by her character, her consistency, and her humility. He wanted to ensure that his help would empower her, not overwhelm her. The letter and the check were carefully designed to offer support while leaving her in control of her own life. He knew that real kindness respected the recipient's dignity, and he had gone to great lengths to make sure Emily would feel valued, not indebted. Later that week, Emily began to process the impact of the gift. She made plans to pay off her debts, repair her car, and finally register for the nursing program she had long dreamed about. She also thought about Rachel, the young mother whose life she had touched with her small act of kindness. Emily realized that life had a way of creating circles of generosity, of returning kindness in unexpected forms. She felt inspired to continue her work at the diner, not just for the money, but for the small way she could help people every day, even though she didn't know it yet. This moment marked a turning point in Emily's life. It wasn't just about financial relief. It was about possibility, hope, and the reminder that good deeds do not go unnoticed. She had acted from the heart, and the universe, or Robert Hale, had noticed. That morning, she understood that her choices, even small ones, could ripple outward in ways she never imagined, touching lives and changing futures. As Emily continued her day, serving coffee, taking orders, and chatting with customers, she carried with her a new sense of purpose. She had been given a chance to pursue her dreams and make a greater impact in the world. She knew that the kindness she had shown to Rachel would continue to ripple outward, and she hoped that she too could inspire others to act with compassion, even in the smallest ways. The envelope, the letter, and the check were more than just material gifts. They were symbols of faith in human goodness, proof that selfless acts are seen, appreciated, and sometimes rewarded in ways that go far beyond imagination. Emily understood that her life was changing, that her journey was about to take a new path, and that her ability to touch lives with her kindness had already set events into motion that would shape her future. By the time her shift ended, Emily walked home with a lightness in her step. She felt hope, gratitude, and determination. She knew that life would still have challenges, but she also knew that one small act of kindness, one decision to help someone without expecting anything in return, could open doors she had never thought possible. And she carried with her the quiet knowledge that her heart, her empathy, and her willingness to help others had already begun to change the world, starting with her own. Emily's life began to change in ways she had never imagined, and it all started to unfold slowly, like sunlight spreading across a quiet morning. After receiving the envelope, the letter, and the check from Robert Hale, she felt a sense of relief unlike anything she had experienced before. For the first time in years, she could breathe without the constant weight of worry pressing down on her shoulders. She began paying off the bills that had haunted her for months, fixing her old car that barely made it to work every day, and most importantly, she enrolled in the nursing program she had dreamed about for years. It felt almost surreal, like a door had opened to a life she had long thought unreachable. Emily approached her studies with the same dedication and compassion that she had shown at the diner. She spent long nights reading textbooks, practicing techniques, and absorbing knowledge with a fierce determination. Her days at the diner remained busy, but now each shift carried a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just earning money to survive. She was working toward a future where she could help people in a different, deeper way. And even with her growing responsibilities, she never lost the warmth that had made Robert Hale notice her in the first place. She still smiled at customers, remembered their names, and offered small gestures of kindness whenever she could. Rachel, the young mother whose meal Emily had paid for, was also beginning to see changes in her life. That single act of generosity had done more than feed her child. It had restored her hope. She started volunteering at a local food bank, inspired by Emily's compassion. The act of giving back made her feel connected to a larger community and reminded her that kindness could be contagious. Rachel found that helping others, even in small ways, lifted her spirits and created a sense of purpose. Her son, too, grew up noticing the importance of generosity and care, lessons instilled through both his mother's efforts and the unexpected kindness they had received that morning at the diner. Emily's story slowly became a quiet legend in the little diner. Regular customers began to notice the glow in her eyes, the calm confidence she carried, and the kindness that seemed to flow naturally from her. Some had no idea what had changed, only that she seemed happier, more at peace, and somehow more capable of handling the world's difficulties. Mr. Thompson, the diner owner, occasionally mentioned Emily's dedication to the new opportunities she had received, though he never revealed the source of her good fortune. It was enough for the staff and the community to see that her life had begun to improve. Meanwhile, Robert Hale watched from a distance, carefully keeping tabs on Emily's progress without intruding on her life. He had been inspired by her act of kindness, and helping her achieve stability and the opportunity to pursue her dreams had been deeply rewarding. He realized that generosity didn't always have to be public or grandiose. Sometimes, the quiet support of one individual could create lasting change. Robert often reflected on how Emily's simple gesture toward a stranger had reminded him of the importance of compassion, humility, and empathy in a world often focused on material wealth and personal gain. Over the months, Emily continued to flourish. She excelled in her nursing program, earning praise from instructors and peers alike for her dedication, her empathy toward patients, and her willingness to go above and beyond to help those in need. Her experiences at the diner and her understanding of real-life struggles gave her a unique perspective in her studies. She became the kind of student who didn't just focus on textbooks and exams, but truly internalized the values of care and human connection. Every patient she helped, every class she excelled in, was a testament to the chain reaction of kindness that had begun with her willingness to help. Rachel, now more confident and stable, continued to work hard to provide for her child. The small but meaningful assistance she had received reminded her that she, too, could extend help to others. She became an active member of her community, organizing small food drives and volunteering whenever she could. The ripple effect of kindness that Emily had sparked extended far beyond what either woman could have predicted. Emily's single act of generosity had not only touched Rachel but had inspired Rachel to touch countless others. Emily never forgot Robert Hale, though she hadn't seen him since that morning when he left the envelope at the diner. His quiet intervention had given her the stability to pursue her dreams and allowed her to continue her work of helping others. She often thought about the importance of giving without expecting anything in return, and she realized that Robert's gesture was a profound example of how support at the right time could transform lives. One day, she hoped she might meet him again, not out of obligation, but to express gratitude and perhaps inspire him in return with the stories of the lives she was now able to touch. The diner itself became a small symbol of community and kindness. Regular patrons would sometimes remark on the warmth and dedication of the staff, noting how Emily's presence seemed to uplift everyone around her. The story of the young mother and the paid meal quietly circulated among locals. Though the names and identities remained mostly private, people spoke about it not as gossip, but as a reminder that small acts of compassion mattered, that even the simplest gestures could create waves far beyond the initial moment. Emily began to mentor new waitresses at the diner, teaching them not only how to serve customers efficiently but also how to treat people with respect, dignity, and genuine care. She emphasized the importance of noticing when someone was struggling, of lending a hand without judgment, and of understanding that kindness could have unexpected and lasting effects. The values she embodied and shared became part of the culture of the diner, ensuring that her ripple effect of generosity continued in a very tangible way. As Emily's life transformed, she kept a quiet journal, recording her experiences and reflecting on the lessons she had learned. She wrote about the importance of empathy, the power of small gestures, and the ways in which her own life had been touched by kindness. She thought about Robert Hale often, and the example he had set by recognizing her heart and acting to support her in meaningful ways. Through her writing, she found a sense of clarity and purpose, understanding that life's greatest rewards often came from connections made through compassion rather than material wealth. Over time, Emily became more confident and selfish. She had faced hardship, worked tirelessly, and seen the world in both its difficult and beautiful forms. The opportunities provided to her through Robert's generosity allowed her to reach beyond mere survival and step into a life of growth, learning, and service. She realized that every small act of kindness she offered could inspire others in ways she might never fully see, just as her one act toward Rachel had inspired a wealthy stranger to make a difference in her life. In the end, the story of that morning at the diner became a quiet, powerful example of human connection. A struggling young mother had been helped, a waitress had acted from the heart, and a billionaire had quietly recognized and supported the goodness he saw. The ripple effect of those moments extended far beyond what any of them could have imagined, creating a chain of kindness, hope, and opportunity. Emily's life had been changed, Rachel's life had been changed, and even Robert Hale had been reminded of the extraordinary power of generosity and compassion. Emily continued to move forward with her studies, her work at the diner, and her acts of kindness. Each day, she carried the lessons of that morning with her, Understanding that a single choice to help someone could set off a wave of change, she remained humble, dedicated, and caring, knowing that her life, once constrained by struggle and worry, was now full of possibility. The impact of that one act, paying for a stranger's meal, continued to ripple outward, touching lives, creating hope, and proving that even small gestures could carry the power to change the world.